Hey guys, RC Anime here. One thing I like to pay attention to is how a filmmaker passes on information. And one of the fundamental aspects of visual storytelling is this. I think there's a lot of subtle stuff we don't consciously realize when it comes to good set design. In this shot alone, we can name at least one personality trait of each character from just looking at their desk space. It also splits the four characters evenly, so they hold equal presence in the scene, because there are two stories going on here. One is the conversation between Aoba, Yoon, and Hajime. The other story, in the bottom left corner, is about Hifumi overcoming her shyness. I think this is done particularly well because even though Hifumi is as visible as the others, it's not until she joins the conversation that do we actually look at her. This kind of staging works when the sets are designed accordingly to match the mood and mechanics of the story.
Ultimately, that's what we really want for the general audience to not be able to imagine that it could take place anywhere else because it's so appropriate. And whatever is in the background always guides you back to the story, guides you back to the thematic material, back to the plot, back to the characters, and always resonates with whatever they're doing.
So let's talk about how new games set designs do this.
その前にちょっとお手洗い。トイレ、トイレ、トイレにトイレ。
The first thing you need to know about set design is that it usually works as an extension to a character, how they live or express themselves. In the original trailer, we catch a shot of Nene's bedroom, with her walls painted orange. However, in the final product, her room is pink. While orange may have been a better balance of color for Nene, the filmmakers decided that pink described her more accurately. It's this subtle stuff that highlights how important set design is when defining a character. In the office space, everyone's desk says something about them. Rin has a picture of her and Ko, Umiko has a showcase of guns, and as Aoba spends more time working there, she displays her accomplishments, which is similar to Ko's desk. And this brings us to the second rule, distinction. One of the most important things about a set design is planning how the characters will interact with it and its distinctive elements. Most office spaces in film and anime tend to be boring and inconsequential. Sometimes it's intentional, but other times it just shows a lack of time or imagination. The characters talk in these spaces, but the space itself doesn't get to do anything. New Game makes its office space immediately recognizable through its green cubicles and colorful shelves. Each spot becomes memorable with specific landmarks. The colorful shelf sits by the entrance of the office, so when we see it, we know where the characters are. Or if we're standing by Ko's desk, we know that right next door is Aoba and Yoon's. When we become this familiar with the set, the geography of the space becomes inherent knowledge, like how we remember where every room of our house is. Not only does it make the place feel more real, we don't become confused by the constant movement of characters. We're the only ones who know Nene ate Ko's pudding. So while the characters talk about it, we can constantly see Nene's expression even if she's turned away from everyone else. It isolates her from the rest of the group as she has no control over a situation she created. And the audience can always keep this positioning in mind, even when this scene cuts through 8 unique shots. And this brings us to the next rule, consistency. I think background art is taken for granted because, unlike real life, you don't have the luxury of simply moving the camera around for different angles. In anime, every time the angle changes, a new perspective of the setting has to be drawn. This even stays true to locations we only see once in the show. In this restaurant scene, there are 27 different angles, which all show different parts of the same space. That's 27 drawings of one interior. Of course, while consistency is important, so is contrast.
はあ？フランスの会社に行ってくる？
From this shot to this shot, not only do we feel Aoba's sudden shock, the overwhelming background also highlights how little power she has over what is happening. After all, sets don't necessarily have to be complex to support an emotion. Sometimes toning down the colors or details can be just as effective.
If you're talking about aesthetics and you're talking about the look of a film, it's much easier to actually have an example. Because, it's all, talking aesthetics can just be hot air. It's much easier to say, look, these are the colors, this is what I'm imagining, this shows you the atmosphere.
And with the right atmosphere, we find ourselves in the same world as the characters. I think this is what separates a good show from a memorable one. To know the setting as well as you know the characters. Of course, not every set design is memorable in the same way that New Games is. But I think New Game offers some of the most intricate examples of set design. Take any scene from the show, and you can find at least one of these rules in play. But always remember,
like any other art medium, it's very subjective and personal. I think for me, there's always a moment when it crystallizes and I'm watching something and I think this is, really, really incredibly done. Many times it's often not because a production is sumptuous or rich in period detail, but rather that everything just feels right.